hey, business is a little rough. We may need a rent reduction. We may need a month or two of free rent. Now, after you hear that statement, I want you to repeat after me and then stop everything. That's fine. We require financials and tax returns to evaluate rent reductions. Please submit those at your earliest convenience, and we'd be happy to take a look at it for you. Boom. 9.99999 times out of 10.
You don't get that information.
You don't get that information, and then it proceeds back to the rent increase, right? All right, what is up? And welcome back to How to Invest in Commercial Real Estate. And we have a really cool topic discussing how to add easy value in your lease renewals. Now, most of these are going to be applicable to retail shopping centers, but they're just as easily applicable to light industrial. You could insert several of these points or kind of the thought process or ideals into like multifamily leases, I'm sure.
They'd be applicable to office as well on some level.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into that, though, we just wrapped up ICSC Vegas, this massive, I would call it worldwide conference in Las Vegas.
I would say it's pretty worldwide, although they may have other huge ones in like Dubai or Hong Kong or Singapore, but this one it's massive. If you want to be overwhelmed with commercial real estate companies, go to this conference. It's May every year in Las Vegas.
Yeah, we tried to overdo it, scheduled a meeting every 30 minutes, and it was 15-minute walk between each booth. So we learned a little something there. But
anyway, if you've been looking for, I mean, there's so many people who say, how do you find these deals? How do you know these people in St. Louis? How do you know that guy? And I mean, I get that question all the time. Do you guys get that question? I feel like we just did a podcast on how we buy stuff across the country. This is how, right? Go to ICSC, get your mind blown. If you're looking at buying property in wherever, you can find 50 brokers in that city, 50 property managers in that city that are going to ICSC, and you can meet them all in one day.
yeah, we came across.
You cannot meet them all in one day.
What was it?
We barely met two handfuls of people in one day.
I think it was 30,000 people were there that one day.
But it's really impressive. And if you wanted to learn about commercial real estate and you just wanted to walk through and stop at each booth and just ask them, hey, what do you guys do? When did you guys get started? What's your specialty? You would learn a lot about the different players in the industry. There's management companies, there's brokers, there's developers, there's equity partners, all of it.
Yeah, we talked to all those people and came away with good contacts and have already started some new deals based on it, some new investments. So
anyway, if you want to get hooked up, ICSC.com, super easy to buy tickets. They're egregiously expensive. Not sponsored by ICSC. If I was, they would be super cheap tickets. Anyway, we're going to get into the show. Today is all about how to maximize value with lease renewals on your property. If you've been watching or listening to this show at all, you know this is one of the biggest times we get to add value because lease term in commercial real estate is typically 5, 7, 10 years plus sometimes. Unless you're in apartments, right? Then you have a 1-year lease. So these leases are so long when they come up for renewal, you have to make sure you're thinking of everything you possibly can to add value in that lease renewal. And how you want to be doing this, how I personally go about doing this is think as if I'm going to sell it. If I was going to sell this property, how would I want to buy this property? How would I want everything to be structured? And to make it as simple as possible, you're trying to make it as easy as possible for a buyer to come in and underwrite your property and understand profitability. So you've got base rent, you've got expenses, and then you've got profitability, right? But if all of your leases are completely triple net leases, then you can just, your base rent is your NOI, right? It's as simple as that because your tenants are paying their proportionate share of all the expenses. So first and foremost, we want to try as hard as we possibly can before doing anything else to make sure our tenants are paying their full proportionate triple net share plus admin fees if we can get it.
Yeah, the important reason we do that is when I go to buy a property, like Braden said, I'm evaluating the net operating income and I'm putting a multiple on that. That's where we get the cap rate. But the more unsure I am of that income, the more I have to hedge on my purchase price because I don't know exactly what I'm getting it into. The reason that big corporate guaranteed tenants get the lowest cap rates is because the income isn't in doubt. You have a big corporation like like a Walgreens or a Starbucks guaranteeing that lease, then you know that money's going to be coming in, you know what they're going to pay, so it removes uncertainty. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, is trying to remove uncertainty in an NOI number in order for you to get that maximum purchase price when you sell. And the first step, like Braden said, is transition all of your leases to triple net leases. A lot of times we see when we look at properties, some are on triple net, some are on double net, some are on gross leases. They all have different terms. And so what we want to do is standardize that from day one. As those leases come renewed, is we want to get everybody on a full triple nets, full taxes, their prorated share, full insurance, all the common area maintenance that goes along with that property. They're going to pay their pro rata share of all of those expenses.
And when you say that plus try to get admin fee, I've never paid admin fee. What are you paying for there, and why are you putting that in there? That's your time. That's our time as the management, or what is admin fee?
Yeah. So let's pretend you're the tenant. Who's paying the taxes?
I am.
Nope.
Oh, no. You are, and then I'm paying you.
Yeah, there you go. So who's paying? Who's paying the insurance?
You are.
I'm getting the insurance policy. I'm quoting it out to make sure it's a good deal. Hopefully, I'm quoting it out for you, right? Yeah. Not just taking the highest bidder. That would suck for you. So my time to quote out the insurance, common area maintenance. That's probably a dozen vendors at least
that you're arranging.
That I'm arranging for. I'm bidding out. I'm throwing in a budget. I'm making sure they're paid. I'm making sure they're showing up, right? So you don't call me and complain. That's the argument that I would use as a landlord with the tenant is, hey, I'm doing all these things for you. The least I can do
is get paid for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of debate that can be had between a landlord and tenant on the admin fee and the management fee. And so, if you have an aggressive management fee, you definitely want to have the administration fee in there because you're going to be doing a lot of work on the tenant's behalf to try to save them money. If you have a really high management fee, you may be able to bend a little bit on the other fee, the administration fee, because you're already getting maybe above market rent on your management fee. So it's a give and take there, but you should be trying to get that administration fee in there. It's just 15% on top of the expenses since you're handling all of them.
Okay.
Well, not all of these are in order, but I would say we're starting out strong with a decent order here. Triple nets is the first thing I check. Are they full triple net? Do they have an admin fee? The next topic we're moving to is we want rent increases, right?
Oh, yeah.
9.99999 times out of 10, we get a rent increase.
Every year. Or just every lease renewal?
At least right there, right? Like we can dive in. Yeah, we want annual rent escalations. Yeah. We want annual rent escalations. Buyers want annual rent escalations. Everybody, it makes sense. Inflation right now is freaking insane if you haven't been living under a rock recently. So yeah, annual rent increases. But yeah, them being full triple net versus a rent increase. So, why would you want to do triple net coverage before a rent increase? It's kind of like net dollars either way. Again, we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to understand the income. So if you're getting $1 either way, I'd rather have it in triple net reimbursement, making sure that's solid than messing with the rent. That being said, if they're already triple net or if they're not, we're moving that rent up.
Yeah, I think what generally happens with people that own commercial assets, especially retail or office or industrial, a little bit more, the multifamilies every year, and you're looking at market rent, so it's a little bit easier to adjust them, is they're just getting comfortable, and they're saying, well, okay, the rent was this, now I'll give them a small increase, or we'll do an increase in 5 years. But we want to encourage you have to push rents. And one way you do that is compounding yearly increases. If you tell a tenant 2%, let's say after 5 years I'm going to raise it 10%, or 2% compounding. 2% compounding yearly gives you way higher increase than 10% after 5 years. And so, but the perception of the tenant is 2% is basically 10% every 5. They're very different, but conceptually they're very similar. So you want to get that tenant used to budgeting for that increase, used to moving up every year instead of wanting a flat rent, and that'll help psychologically them to be okay with those increases. Once you get them used to those annual increases, it really starts to push that rent up over time.
So if you deal with tenants, you're going to start to notice that every now and then tenants are going to have their shit together. Every now and then. Mm-hmm. And when a tenant really has their shit together, in my opinion, they immediately hit you below the belt, right? Because they're trying to anchor low. They know a thing or two about negotiating. They're like, hey, business is a little rough. We may need a rent reduction. We may need a month or two of free rent. Now, after you hear that statement, I want you to repeat after me and then stop everything. That's fine. We require financials and tax returns to evaluate rent reductions. Please submit those at your earliest convenience, and we'd be happy to take a look at it for you. Yeah. Boom. 9.99999 times out of 10.
You don't get that information.
You don't get that information, and then it proceeds back to the rent increase, right?
Yeah, but it's a good point. I mean, if they are truly struggling, then that gives you evidence that they're struggling. Obviously, in any negotiation, you're not going to take their word for it. And so when they say, I need a rent reduction, I can't make the rent, then we say, okay, prove it to us. But even after that, let's say they weren't making a ton of money. My first decision, once they say I need a rent reduction and I've looked at their financials and let's say they're not making that much money, I say, man, I'm really sorry that you guys didn't do well in the space. Is it okay if we start marketing your space, see if we can get a better tenant in there? Instantly puts them back on their back foot. But here's what happens when you say that, is that they're either going to react one of two ways, right? They're going to be like, yeah, go ahead. Either they're negotiating or not. That's a great play, because then it tells me that they're serious about leaving, and I may not want them to leave. The other reaction you're going to get is, hey, no, okay. Let's not show the space to other tenants here. Let's just, negotiate. Well, then I know that they really do want to stay, and this is all negotiating. So everything you do when a renewal is coming up, it's all geared in negotiations towards both understanding what the tenant's motivations are, how likely are they to leave, and how much rent increase can you get away with without damaging their business.
At the end of the day, you need successful businesses that are profitable to pay you rent to stay in business, right? So you can't go above and beyond. I think that's how we end this, right? You need to measure the business. You need to measure the market rent for the area, the submarket. There's several shopping centers that we own where I know they can't go get a comparable space within miles for anywhere close to what they're paying me. So we go fairly aggressive on our lease renewals because we kind of have the crappiest space in the corridor. So like if you want a space in that corridor, you're going to have to go pay double the amount of rent, my man. Like, this is a good deal. And then they go, may shop it out, and then they're coming back. Okay, yeah, this is a fair lease renewal.
And look, we are going to be tough negotiators, and we hope that everyone listening will be tough negotiators on their property as well. But what I will say is that we always also try to be reasonable. Tough, but reasonable. And so there's been instances where I knew the tenant wasn't going to go anywhere, and I knew their rent was well below market, and I could have given a 40% increase. That isn't reasonable. And so, the most I think I've ever given someone, even when they were way below market, is 15%, 20% increase just to try to get them up. But we're not going to blow people's business up just because we can. We're going to try to be reasonable, but we also want to, over time, 5 years, 10 years, work them up to market rent. So,
all right, next point. This is a fun one because probably your biggest exposure in commercial real estate assets is the inherent real estate. And we don't talk about that a lot on the show because it's really about the money. Again, the inherent real estate you kind of get for free, right? But the money is why we're buying this real estate, is because it's in demand. People lease it from us. So every now and then, the building is going to start to deteriorate. It's going to need a new roof. An HVAC unit's going to go out. Your parking lot's going to need resurfaced. And again, this stuff is insanely expensive. TPO roofing is like $7 to $10+ per square foot. If you have a 50,000 square foot shopping center, that could be a $500,000 plus roof, assuming there's no catastrophic damage under that. Parking lot is the exact same way. You can spend hundreds and hundreds and millions of dollars on concrete and asphalt. At the end of the day, the tenants in the shopping center and their customers and their usage is what's deteriorating this. So we think, and a lot of people in the industry think, that the tenants should be paying their proportionate share of these deferred maintenance items like the roof and the parking lot and the HVAC. So we're very diligent on putting that back in our common area maintenance charge. And again,
do you specifically say in the lease, you should specifically say parking lot, HVAC, roof repair is included? In-cam or whatever, or maybe it's a separate item. I don't know. Yeah,
there's a whole page almost of operating expenses that we're specifically allowed to bill, and we don't limit it to that. But obviously, when you're specific versus vague in a contract, specificity always wins. So you need to specifically put in there that operating expenses can include roof repair and replacement, HVAC repair and replacement, parking lot repair and replacement. And like Joel said earlier, tough but fair, right? It's not like we're just going to say $500,000, bill it in CAM 1 year and all of these tenants are paying a proportionate share of this $500,000
So how
roof.
do you do it? Say you do have $500,000. How do you proportion that out to the different tenants?
How we try to do it is, let's say that we're going to replace the parking lot. We may come up with a repayment plan where we bill a pro rata share back to the tenants over 2 or 3 years or 4 years, maybe even longer. Obviously, if someone has 1 year left on their lease and they're not planning on renewing, and I'm going to replace the parking lot, I don't want to hit them with their full pro rata share that year when they're not going to be around to see the value of that parking lot. And same with the roof. Another one is the HVAC. They need it replaced. Well, they're going to be the ones using it, and they're the ones that have used it over the years. So we typically say, okay, we're going to assign a life to the value of that HVAC. Maybe it's 60 months, maybe it's 120 months, and we're going to divide the cost of that HVAC by 120, let's say, or 60 or 84 or 7 years, and then we're going to bill them monthly for that. And then so if they stay for 10 years, then they're going to pay that whole thing off. Yeah. But they get the whole use of the whole life of that. If they only stay 3 years, let's say they have 3 years left of their use, they only have to pay 3 years, only the time that they're using that brand new HVAC. Okay. So that's how we try to be reasonable and fair in that. And the other point that you didn't mention on this is that we don't put CAM caps or CAM limits.
Is that a common thing?
Well, it's a common thing to cap CAM because what tenants will say is, well, I want to cap the CAM because I don't want you to be able just to increase it by whatever amount. The thing is, if your landlord is good and reasonable, they're not going to be passing on any costs that aren't associated with the property. What typically happens is lawn care will go up, insurance costs go up, taxes can for sure go up.
100% taxes are going up.
And especially on a sale or a refinance, they may jump it significantly. And so the tenant, they may say, well, I don't want my cost to jump. Well, that's tough. I mean, it's the cost of the center. And as long as we're doing our due diligence to get the best pricing on all of those items, we have to pass those on in order to run an efficient property. And so we don't allow CAM caps. We may inherit some, but we don't propagate them. We don't keep them going. We stop them on lease renewals. And all we're asking there is that they just pay their pro rata share of whatever cost we incur to manage the center that they're taking advantage of.
Okay.
Boom. 3 points all in one. I love it. All right. Next one, options, right? So let's talk about options. A lot of people can look at an OM and say there's, 7 years of lease term remaining on an initial 10-year lease. So, right, they're 3 years in the lease. They have 7 years left, but they've got a 1 5-year option. I've literally had people say, oh, they've got 12 years of term left. I'm like, no, they don't. They've 7 and they have a 5-year option. Here's another scenario I've seen all the time is a 15-year lease, but at the end of year 10, they have the right to cancel. That is a 10-year lease with a 5-year option. Who gets the benefit of the option?
100% of the time, the tenant gets the benefit.
100% of the time, the benefit, right? Because as a landlord, let's say it's a 10-year lease. We didn't have the ability to negotiate, change, add, do anything different for 10 years, right? If they have an option for an additional 5, they just write you a letter that says, hey, I'm extending for an additional 5.
Yeah,
That's it.
Can an option be okay if the option says that there's a certain increase in rent?
Sure, but again, you're just immediately inhibiting yourself to negotiate anything.
Even not, yeah.
I mean, think about this, Brian. Okay, you have an increase built into that option period, and it comes up to the tenant gets to decide whether to take that option or not.
He's going to do whatever is his favor.
That's right. Yeah. So if the increase is not enough, it's lower than market, he's going to take that option. You don't have a chance to increase it. If it's too high, he'll say, I don't want my option, and he'll start negotiating with you on a lower price. Yeah.
So,
and he can threaten to leave as well.
I just had this happen to me at a center we own, and I'll leave it at that. But tenant had an option to extend for another 3 years at a predetermined rate that I myself had determined. It was a renewal I did, so it wasn't somebody else's. It was a decent option. I gave it to them. They asked for it. They got it. They reached out to me a month ago, 2 months ago maybe, and they want to renew their lease. They already have an option. I'm like, hey, you already have an option. Yeah, we're trying to get these tenant improvement dollars, yada, yada, yada. They're negotiating. The option's about to expire. I think it just expired. So now the rent is inherently going to be more expensive than that option. They did not take the option. And now, I'm going up.
Yeah.
You had the option. I gave you this great deal. I gave you 6 months before your lease expired to accept it, and you didn't.
It's just funny how a lot of landlords think that options are somehow a benefit to them. They look at these leases and are like, well, they have an initial 5-year term and they got 6 5-year options.
That means they want to stay.
I mean, that means nothing. Those are totally irrelevant to a value discussion, because any one of those they could leave. And typically when you have that many option periods, you're going to be way behind on market rent by the time you get to those, because they're just, you can't foresee inflation, especially what we've had the last year or two. So we are not a big fans of options. If I'm going to give an option, I'm going to give it at, let's say, market rent.
Fair market value.
Fair market value for the rent. That way, at least whatever the market rent is at the time, we can fight over it and I can try to get it. But it's not going to be a fixed set where if market rent is higher, they can take that option and get a deal. That's the best I'll do for them typically.
Okay. All right. All right. We've talked about triple nets a lot. I can't harp on how important the triple net coverage is, making sure your triple net language in your lease is as tight as possible and the tenants are used to paying their actual proportionate share of the actual expenses of the center. To do that, right, in the beginning, you're just coming up with the budget. You're saying, hey, big round numbers for the example, we plan on spending $100,000 in expenses for insurance, property taxes, and common area maintenance. So we'll bill you 1/12 of that every single month for your proportionate share. And then at the end of the year, we'll reconcile it out based on what we actually spent. Say we spent $110,000. Well, then I'm going to send you a bill in January, February, March of the following year and say, hey, last year we were planning on spending 100. We ended up spending 110. Here's your bill for the overage.
For your portion of the overage.
Right. We put language in there that says after we give you that bill in reconciliation, you have 30 days before it's due. Once it's due, it's no longer able to be disputed.
30 days to dispute it is what the language says.
It's not what it says, but that's essentially what it means. Okay. It's 30 days until it's due. After it's due, it's not able to be disputed.
Okay.
Right. So you'll have tenants drag their feet, right? Because it's a bill. They didn't look into it. And then, 2 months later, they're like, hey, I don't think this is right. You guys shouldn't have spent $110,000 next year. Well, you had a month to look it over, George or, AB Nails LLC. And now, unfortunately, it's due. Next year, be sure to catch me in that 30-day window after the reconciliation. We'll be sure to look through it for you. I mean, we give them copies of everything we spent. We give them copies of the budget. It's easily readable, but it's just...
What if it's a big bill and they don't have the money? Because sometimes there's unforeseen events during the year that maybe increases the total CAM charges to up 20-30%.
I mean, we've sent out some big CAM reconciliation bills. We sent out one to a tenant and it was $24,000. I mean, it's a substantial tenant. I think the tenant has like tens and tens of thousands of square feet with us, so it's not out of line. But yeah, from our perspective, somebody owing you $24,000 from a CAM reconciliation, that's a big bill. And that was this instance, hey, we're going to pay it. Hey, we're going to pay it. Hey, we're going to pay it. Hey, wait, we don't think we should pay this. It's like, first of all, stop lying to me. And second of all, it's due now. So at that point, I would say you would have to treat it just like anything, just like past due rent, right? Like you're going to have to figure out a payment plan. Or you're going to have to start evicting them, whatever. But that's why you want to have this language in there, so it's due and payable and it's treated as rent and you can actually evict them on it.
Yeah, we typically allow a payment plan so they can pay that out over 12 months, let's say, or something. And then we really do try not to come up with those big variances. And sometimes we come in under and we give checks back. So it can go either way.
The time we come up with big variances is when we acquire properties, right? So, they go through 6 months of paying half the basis and property tax, right? And then the guy bought it for $5 million. We bought it for $10 million. So the property tax literally doubles, right? You've got to be really expeditious in getting that increase out to them, or you're going to have a big reconciliation at the end of the year. All right. Next and last point. We've dedicated an entire episode to this topic. It's so important, but we feel like we should mention it now because it is lease renewals. We're talking about adding value. But this is just a reminder that the face value of your rent, let's say it a different way, the rent you're getting is the most important thing that you could possibly have. So we've done the equation about how you can entice tenants to pay more rent for giving them tenant improvement dollars or free rent, right? And you're essentially giving them $5,000, $10,000 in tenant improvements, but the value of your property, because they're paying more rent, could be hundreds of thousands more. So we're just reminding you that if you can give tenant improvements and it increases the value of your property and the face value of your rent. You should really look at evaluating that and doing it if you've got the TI dollars available. There's, again, a lot of mom and pop owners of commercial real estate think, oh, I don't want to give you any money. The property just continually goes down in value. The tenants start looking shabby and shabby and shabby because nobody's reinvesting into this. The rent is artificially low because you're just saying, hey, if you leave, I'm going to have to pay this next tenant $100,000 to come in and remodel. So I'll let you have this for super cheap as long as you stay. That is the wrong mentality, guys. That is completely wrong.
Yeah. So if you buy an 8 cap, every dollar of NOI, you can basically take 12 times that roughly and get the value in a purchase price. So if you can get, if you give a tenant, let's say $5,000, and then you can get, $5,000 more in rent a year, well, you're going to get 12 times that in a sale price, or $60,000. Now that's not necessarily the math you'll have. Maybe you give the tenant $20,000 and you get $5,000 in additional rent every year. That means, think about it this way: you give 25, but you get $5,000 a year in rent. Well, they think it's a great deal, right? They get $25,000 up front and they only pay $5,000 a year in extra rent. But that's 25% return on your money if you continue to get it over time. Right. I gave 25, but I get 5 every year. But then when I sell, I get 12 times 5, let's just say, or 60,000. So just think of that math. I earn 25% a year, and then I get 12 times that amount at the end. You're always going to be money ahead if you structure it correctly. And it's a way to benefit the tenant. They can go in there and fix up their store. It's way nicer. They have to pay a very small yearly amount to get that cash. And they've improved the value of your property, both when you sell, but also if they leave, the space will be nicer.
So this isn't a show about tenants trying to get amazing lease renewals, but I will give you one tip, because there's a lot of landlords who are inherently tenants in spaces like Brian over here, right? It's always cheaper to go get a loan from a bank. Stop asking your landlord for TI dollars. I mean, go get a loan. Like, if you've got a good enough concept, a good enough business, and a good enough balance sheet, you're going to go get a loan from a bank.
Yeah, and it's usually not a whole lot of money, right?
And here, okay, so if you are a tenant and you want TI dollars, finalize the rent negotiation first, then tell them you have to have TI dollars to do it. That way, they're not sticking that tenant improvement dollars into the base rent. Yeah. So I would do that. And then if you can't get them to pay your TI, then go to a bank or another source.
Yeah, good idea.
All right, last tip. We didn't talk about it. Don't let your property manager renew your leases.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah, because they don't have the incentive that you do, right?
They don't care. They're looking for a fee. They wanted to get pushed across the finish line as fast as they can. They're not getting anything on the exit. They don't care about your exit. They don't care of the value of your exit or the value of your lease renewal. They want that check on their desk as fast as freaking possible.
Yeah, that percentage that they're getting and maybe some increase, it doesn't mean a lot to them. So they just want to get the thing done and get the check.
Always handle your own renewals. And, I just thought of a new show topic is we need to do one for tenants, how to negotiate your landlord.
Why would we do that?
Well, because both, if tenants are listening, they'll benefit, but landlords will benefit from hearing the arguments from the tenants, and they'll be less susceptible to fall into traps that if the tenant isn't a good negotiator.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because you guys have had some good negotiators, right? These big companies, they're good negotiators.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They have,
and so it'll show landlords how to combat the arguments that the tenants are giving them.
These big companies, they have people that's all they do.
I can see Braden doesn't like it. He's
look at that.
Just not the super secret tips. I mean, maybe some of the
he doesn't feel confident in out negotiating a strong tenant. Now I feel confident I can give away all the secrets and I'll still out negotiate them. But Braden hasn't had quite that experience.
Joel's just going to punch him in the face.
All right, guys. Hope that was beneficial. 8 easy ways to maximize value on lease renewals.
Don't say 8. We literally said that in the beginning.
I was kidding about don't say it.
All righty, guys. We'll catch you next week on how to invest in commercial real estate.